The forest is very quiet, but this silence is not because it is empty. On the contrary, it is where everything begins. The slight crackling of a branch, the change in the direction of the wind, an almost unnoticeable shadow passing between the leaves. In nature, nothing is random or accidental, and most of the time we fail to notice the most important stories passing right in front of our eyes, because they do not shout, they do not try to show themselves, they simply exist. What you are watching in this video right now is the same. Maybe you see a deer, maybe just a momentary silhouette, but right now you are witnessing much more than that. Deer are creatures that have lived in this world for millions of years, long before humans appeared, learning the language of the forests. They keep the pulse of nature. If there is a deer in a forest, it means that forest is still alive. But this life is becoming a little quieter every day. Because when deer disappear, we often do not notice it. There is no noise when they vanish, no alarm sounds. One day, the forest simply no longer feels the same. This documentary does not tell the story of just an animal. This documentary also tells the story of a world that is silently changing. Deer are not fast, they are not flashy either, but they are masters of survival. What makes them strong is not their muscles or their antlers. Their true strength is their ability to read their surroundings. They evaluate hundreds of details that a human would never notice in a single second. The scents carried by the wind, the vibration of the ground, the behavior of birds, all of it carries meaning. For a deer, the forest is a complex map, and on that map, one wrong step can be the last step. Perhaps that is why we feel an instinctive respect when we look at deer, because they do not negotiate with the rules of nature. They adapt, they retreat, they wait, and when necessary, they become invisible. But today, being invisible is no longer enough. Humanity has fragmented forests. Roads were built, cities grew, and during this growth, the paths that deer had used for centuries were cut. Migration routes were left incomplete. The silence was broken. An opening that was once safe can now be deadly. A valley that was once an escape route can now become a trap. In this documentary, we will not only look at the world of deer from a distance, we will see through their eyes, we will hear with their ears, and perhaps most importantly, we will try to understand their silence. Because when deer sense danger, they do not shout. Sometimes they don't even run. They simply freeze. They stop moving. This is a survival strategy shaped over millions of years, becoming invisible. But in the modern world, being invisible does not always save you. Today, many deer face dangers they have never known before: cars, fences, lights, noise, and a speed they cannot comprehend, the speed of the human world. Throughout this documentary, we will ask this question: why are deer still here? How did they survive? And more importantly, how much longer can they endure? When a deer fawn is born, the world is cruel to it. The first days are the most dangerous days. The mother hides it. But this hiding is not out of love, it is out of necessity, because in nature, love is often shown through distance. The less the fawn is seen, the safer it is. In this documentary, you will also witness these small moments: a fawn's first step, a mother's silent watch, a herd moving through the mist. And while all of this happens, nature offers no explanation. It does not dramatize anything. It simply continues. Humans, however, must choose where they stand in this continuity. Deer are not a test given to us by nature. They are a warning. They are the memory of the forests. The quieter a forest is, the more fragile it becomes, and deer are the shadows walking within that silence. While watching this documentary, you may ask yourself this question: if one day we walk through a forest and see no deer, will we realize it? Perhaps this story is exactly about that, about noticing. Now be quiet. Look carefully, because in a moment, the door to a world that most people pass by without ever noticing is opening. And behind that door, the silent but vital story of deer begins. As the first light of morning falls over the forest, the camera slowly moves forward. The mist drifting between the trees makes it feel as if nature is just beginning to awaken. In this silence are creatures moving unnoticed. Deer. These animals, who lived on the same lands, along the same paths, and within the same cycle for centuries, are among the most careful and cautious inhabitants of nature. Seeing deer is often difficult. They do not like to reveal themselves. The presence of a deer is usually understood first through silence. Birds suddenly stopping their calls, branches swaying when there is no wind, or fresh tracks on the ground. The camera often captures not the deer itself, but the signs it leaves behind, because deer have learned to become invisible in harmony with nature. A deer's life begins the moment it is born, but its true test starts from that moment on. The fawn is extremely vulnerable when it comes into the world. Its spotted coat exists to hide it on the forest floor. The camera shows the motionless fawn lying among the grass from a low angle. Its mother is nearby, but not in sight. The mother deer knows that the best way to protect her fawn is to avoid drawing attention. As days pass, the fawn learns to stand. The first steps are unsteady, but in nature there is no time. The fawn must quickly keep up with its mother's pace. As the camera captures the moments when the fawn tries to follow its mother, it shows how fast and mandatory learning is in the wild. Deer are social animals, but this sociality is quiet. Communication within the herd is not established through shouting, but through glances and body language. When one individual raises its ears, the others stop at the same time. Even if the danger is not yet visible, the herd is ready. This shared awareness is the result of millions of years of evolution. In the early hours of the day, deer move into more open areas to feed. Meadows, forest clearings, and riverbanks are among the places they visit most often. The camera slowly follows a grazing deer. Even when its head is lowered to the ground, its ears continue to listen to its surroundings. Surviving in nature requires feeding and staying alert at the same time. The feeding habits of deer directly affect the ecosystem they live in. Which plant is consumed more and which less gradually changes the structure of the entire area. This impact is not limited to plants. Insects, birds, and other mammals are also affected by this change. Deer, without realizing it, become one of the architects of the area they inhabit. As the seasons progress, the lives of deer also change. Spring is the period when nature comes back to life. Fresh shoots emerge, food becomes abundant. This period is also the time of new lives. As the camera watches fawns exploring the forest for the first time with their mothers, it quietly tells the story of nature's cycle. During the summer months, deer spread out over wider areas. The structure of herds loosens. Young individuals begin to move more freely. The camera shows scenes of young deer playing with each other and testing their strength. These games are like small rehearsals for the real struggles they will face in the future. When autumn arrives, the atmosphere of the forest changes completely. As the leaves fall, movement also increases in the world of the deer. The powerful calls of male deer begin to echo through the forest. These sounds are both a call and a challenge. The camera records the moments when these calls fill the forest on a misty morning. During the mating season, the struggles between male deer are among the most striking scenes in nature. Antlers lock together. The ground is torn up. Strength and endurance are tested. However, these struggles are usually short-lived. The weaker one withdraws, because in nature, unnecessary loss of energy reduces the chance of survival. As winter approaches, the landscape hardens. The ground covered with snow is a great test for deer. Food decreases, the cold increases. Deer must conserve their energy during this period. Their movements slow down, and the herds stay more tightly together. As the camera follows a herd moving through the snow from a distance, it shows the harsh face of nature. For some deer species, winter means migration. Journeys of hundreds of kilometers begin. Rivers are crossed, mountains are passed. The camera allows the viewer to feel the determination of the herd and the power of instinct during this long journey. Predators are an inseparable part of these journeys. Wolf packs follow the deer from a distance. Usually, the weakest individual is targeted. These scenes are presented in the documentary without dramatization, in the neutral language of nature, because this cycle is part of the balance of the ecosystem. Human impact enters the world of deer more and more each year. Forest roads, residential areas, and agricultural lands interrupt the routes that deer know by heart. The camera shows a deer standing by the side of a road. It is hesitant. It wants to cross, but it senses the danger. This moment quietly tells the relationship between the modern world and nature. Despite this, deer continue to exist. Adaptation is in their nature. They learn new areas. They adapt to new risks. As the camera slowly moves toward the depths of the forest, we watch a deer disappear from sight. This documentary narrative does not end here, because the story of deer is only a part of the great story of nature that continues without ever stopping. As the first light of morning falls over the forest, the camera slowly moves forward. The mist filtering through the trees makes it feel as if nature is just waking up. Within this silence, there are creatures moving unnoticed. Deer. These animals which have continued their lives for centuries on the same lands, the same paths, and within the same cycle, are among the most careful and cautious inhabitants of nature. Seeing deer is often difficult. They do not like to show themselves. The presence of a deer is usually understood first through silence, the sudden stopping of bird calls, branches moving when there is no wind, or fresh tracks on the ground. The camera often captures not a deer, but the signs it leaves behind, because deer have learned to be invisible in harmony with nature. A deer's life begins at the moment it is born, but its real test begins from that moment on. When the fawn comes into the world, it is extremely vulnerable. Its spotted coat exists to hide it on the forest floor. The camera shows the fawn lying motionless among the grass from a low angle. Its mother is nearby, but not in sight. The mother deer knows that the best way to protect her fawn is not to draw attention. As the days pass, the fawn learns to stand up. Its first steps are unsteady. But in nature, there is no time. The fawn must keep up with its mother's pace in a very short time. As the camera captures the moments when the fawn tries to follow its mother, it shows how fast and necessary learning is in nature. Deer are social animals, but this sociality is silent. Communication within the herd is established not by shouting, but through looks and body language. When one individual raises its ears, it causes the others to stop at the same time. Even if danger is not yet visible, the herd is ready. This shared awareness is the result of millions of years of evolution. In the early hours of the day, deer move into more open areas to feed. Meadows, forest clearings, and stream banks are the places they visit most often. The camera follows a grazing deer with slow movements. Even when it lowers its head to the ground, its ears continue to listen to the surroundings. Surviving in nature requires feeding and staying alert at the same time. The feeding habits of deer directly influence the ecosystem in which they live. Which plant is consumed more and which less changes the structure of the entire area over time. This effect is not limited to plants. Insects, birds, and other mammals also take their share of this change. Deer become architects of the areas they live in without realizing it. As the seasons progress, the lives of deer also change. Spring is the period when nature comes back to life. Fresh shoots emerge, food becomes abundant. This period is also the time when new lives begin. As the camera watches fawns exploring the forest for the first time with their mothers, it quietly tells the cycle of nature.
From a documentary narration perspective, deer can be considered the silent heroes of nature. They continue their lives without shouting, without drawing attention, but with great determination. In the depths of the forest, on snow-covered plains, or in misty valleys, every step they take is the result of an ancient agreement they have formed with nature. This agreement is built on balance. It is an effort to exist without consuming excessively, without completely destroying the environment. This narrative does not end here. The historical conflicts between deer and humans, the evolution of hunting, modern conservation efforts, and the threats they may face in the future are ongoing parts of this long story. Deer are not only a part of the past, but also a part of the future. Their fate largely depends on how humanity shapes its relationship with nature. The relationship between humans and deer is as old as human history itself. For the first hunter-gatherer communities, deer were not only a source of food, but also beings that represented the continuity of life. Their meat was food, their skins were clothing, and their bones were used to make tools. However, this relationship was never limited solely to physical needs. Deer became creatures that represented the spirit of nature in the early human mind. Their graceful movements, silent progress, and sudden escapes inspired both admiration and respect in humans. It is no coincidence that deer figures appear so frequently among the first images drawn on cave walls. These drawings reflect not only a hunting scene, but also the emotional bond humans formed with nature. Deer have been seen as guides in many cultures. A deer appearing before a person lost in the forest is described as a sacred being that leads them onto the right path. These narratives show a striking similarity across geographies and cultures. For the communities living on the Central Asian steppes, the deer was a bridge between the sky and the earth. In shamanic rituals, deer antlers were used as symbols of communication with the spirit world. In Turkish mythology, the deer sometimes appears as a mother figure and sometimes as a guide. In these narratives, the deer is never an ordinary animal. It is a symbol of wisdom and protection. In the deep forests of Europe, deer became symbols of kingdoms and nobility. Throughout the Middle Ages, deer hunting was considered a privilege reserved only for the nobility. This situation associated the deer with power and status. However, this privilege also brought excessive hunting over time. In many regions, deer populations declined severely, and some species faced the danger of extinction. For indigenous peoples living on the North American continent, deer occupy the center of the life cycle. Rituals performed before hunting are a sign of the respect shown to the deer. For every deer hunted, thanks were given to nature, and excessive hunting was avoided. This understanding can be considered an early example of a sustainable relationship with nature. As time progressed, humanity's impact on nature increased, and this impact left deep marks on deer as well. The spread of agriculture, the conversion of forests into farmland, and the growth of cities narrowed the natural habitats of deer. Vast lands where they once roamed freely became fragmented and restricted. This fragmentation not only reduced living spaces, but also negatively affected genetic diversity between populations. In the modern era, hunting has taken a different dimension from the struggle for survival of the past. Today, deer hunting in many countries is subject to legal regulations. Specific seasons,
quota systems, and strict inspections aim to keep populations under control. However, illegal hunting remains a serious problem. Deer hunted especially for their antlers are at great risk because of this. Another major threat faced by deer is climate change. Changing temperatures affect vegetation structure and seasonal patterns. This directly impacts the food sources of deer. Shorter winters or unexpected cold waves can reduce the survival chances of fawns. At the same time, the spread range of some parasites and diseases is expanding, creating new risks for deer populations. Despite all these threats, deer have a remarkable ability to adapt. Some species have learned to live near human settlements and have begun feeding actively at night. This situation also brings human-deer conflicts. Damage to agricultural lands creates serious problems for farmers. However, these conflicts are often the result of poor planning and insufficient conservation policies. Conservation efforts are of vital importance for the future of deer today. National parks, protected areas, and wildlife corridors allow deer to move safely. Scientists monitor deer migration routes, behaviors, and population dynamics through satellite tracking systems and field studies. These data enable the development of more effective conservation strategies. Documentary cameras play an important role in making these efforts visible. Filming deer in their natural environments without human interference offers viewers the opportunity to form a strong connection. A deer silhouetted from the mist in a silent forest is not only an aesthetic image, but also a reminder of the fragility of nature. Deer are like a mirror of humanity's relationship with nature. How we treat them shows how we view nature itself. Are we trying to control it, or are we seeking ways to coexist? This question will determine the future not only of deer, but of all wildlife. In the later part of this long narrative, the role of deer in scientific research, their genetic diversity, and possible future scenarios will be examined in greater depth. As deer continue to walk with silent steps, humanity must learn to hear the echo of those steps. Scientific research reveals that deer are extremely valuable creatures, not only aesthetically and culturally, but also in terms of understanding how ecosystems function. Modern biology and ecology studies consider deer as much more than a single species. They are living indicators that provide important clues about the health of their environment. An increase or decrease in a deer population in a region is often a sign of larger changes within that ecosystem. The genetic structure of deer is the result of long evolutionary processes. There are clear genetic distinctions among species living in different geographical regions. These distinctions reflect the adaptation strategies animals have developed in response to climate conditions, food sources, and predators. In deer species living in cold regions, thick fur, larger body mass, and metabolic traits suitable for energy storage stand out, while species living in warm climates display smaller body structures and features that allow heat to dissipate more easily. Genetic diversity is critically important for the long-term survival of a population. High genetic diversity provides stronger resistance to diseases and environmental changes. However, habitat fragmentation isolates deer populations and reduces genetic diversity. This can lead to population weakening and increased risk of extinction in the long term. For this reason, scientists consider the creation of wildlife corridors and the maintenance of connections between populations as a vital priority.
Diseases observed in deer also constitute an important part of research. Parasitic infections, bacterial and viral diseases can spread rapidly, especially in stressed populations. With climate change, the expansion of some parasites into wider areas has created new threats for deer. In addition, increased contact with domestic animals and livestock raises the risk of disease transmission between species. At this point, the indirect effects of human activities become evident once again. Every intervention in natural habitats produces consequences far more complex than they appear. The construction of a road or a new settlement does not only mean cutting down a few trees, it also means disrupting deer migration routes, reducing food sources, and increasing stress levels. Deer under stress become more vulnerable to disease. Population management requires a delicate balance in modern wildlife science. In some regions, deer numbers have increased rapidly due to the absence of natural predators. This can lead to overconsumption of vegetation and damage to ecosystems. In such cases, methods such as controlled hunting or reintroducing predator species into nature are debated. These decisions must be made based on scientific data and ethical principles. Behind the dramatic scenes often seen in documentary narratives lies this complex balance. A wolf pack hunting a deer may appear cruel on the surface. However, this is part of nature's internal order. Predators maintain the overall health of the population by hunting weak and sick individuals. This process works in favor of deer in the long term as well. Looking to the future, the fate of deer largely depends on the decisions humanity will make. Sustainable land use, conscious conservation policies, and increasing public awareness about nature can improve the chances of deer survival. Education and documentaries are powerful tools in creating this awareness. A viewer watching a deer fawn take its first steps may begin to rethink their connection with nature. Advances in technology offer new opportunities for deer conservation. Satellite data, drone imagery, and genetic analyses allow deer populations to be monitored much more closely. This information is guiding not only for scientists, but also for policymakers and local communities. Decisions based on accurate data can balance human needs with wildlife conservation. The documentary camera builds a bridge between these scientific studies and natural life. Sometimes it records the silent waiting of a researcher, and sometimes a herd of deer moving across a snowy plain. These images do not only provide information to the viewer, they also offer an opportunity to build empathy. Observing deer from a distance means becoming a guest in their world, even if only briefly. At the end of this long journey, deer still continue to exist as the quiet inhabitants of forests and open lands. They need neither human applause nor approval. Existence is their only purpose. However, this existence is now more fragile than ever. The story of deer is in fact the story of humanity itself. It reflects our ability to live in harmony with nature, our limits, and our responsibilities. If we can learn to listen to the steps of these silent creatures, perhaps we can find a chance to redefine our relationship with nature. Because every deer step echoing in the forest sounds like the voice of a world that does not belong to us, but has been entrusted to us. As time continues to continuously flow through the forests, deer go on with their lives without being aware of this flow. For them, there are no calendars and no future plans. There is only the moment, the direction of the wind, the scent of the soil, and the surrounding silence. For a deer, life consists of reading these signs correctly. A single misread moment can determine the difference between survival and extinction. The documentary camera often records this silence. For long periods, it may seem as if nothing is happening. However, this calmness is actually nature at its most intense. Even while standing still, a deer constantly scans its surroundings. Its ears turn in different directions, its nose tests the air, its eyes try to catch even the smallest movement. This state of alertness is a survival reflex filtered through millions of years of evolution. The world deer live in does not resemble the speed of humans. Everything here is slower, but at the same time much sharper. Hunger, cold, predators, and disease are always present. Despite this, deer are not creatures that live in panic. They have learned to live with risk. They do not waste unnecessary energy and do not engage in unnecessary struggle. The basic rule nature has taught them is clear. Balance is essential for survival. This balance applies not only to the lives of deer, but to the entire ecosystem they inhabit. If there are no deer in a forest, vegetation can grow uncontrollably. If there are too many deer, plants cannot regenerate. If there are no predators, deer numbers increase. If there are too many predators, deer numbers decrease. Nature is a complex but consistent system built on these mutual interactions. When humans become part of this system, the balance is often disrupted. Even well-intentioned interventions can produce unexpected consequences. Eliminating a predator can lead to an explosion in deer populations. Building a road can eliminate a migration route that has been used for centuries. For this reason, modern conservation philosophy must focus more on understanding nature than on managing it. Documentaries play an important role in spreading this understanding. Watching a herd of deer slowly pass through a misty valley does not only offer the viewer a visual experience, it also teaches patience, silence, and attentiveness. Deer remind us that nature is not a territory to be conquered, but a living space in which we must coexist. The first steps of deer fawns are the most fragile moments of this long story. These small creatures, who know nothing about the world yet, must learn the basic rules of survival within just a few days. The mother hides the fawn, leaves it alone, but does not abandon it completely. This distance exists for the fawn's safety. Nature operates through decisions that may seem emotional, but are extremely rational. As years pass, that fawn grows, becomes part of a herd, or wanders the forest as a solitary male. It accumulates its own experiences. It learns dangerous areas and memorizes safe paths. Perhaps one day it will guide its own fawn. Thus, knowledge is not transmitted genetically, but behaviorally. This transmission is the silent culture of deer. It's difficult to speak with certainty about the future of deer. In some regions, populations are recovering thanks to conservation efforts. In other regions, habitats are being irreversibly lost. This contrasting picture reflects the inconsistency of humanity's relationship with nature. The same species can be protected in one place and ignored in another. However, hope still exists. Proper planning, decisions based on scientific data, and increasing public awareness about nature can improve the chances of deer survival. Education and documentaries are powerful tools in creating this awareness. A viewer watching a deer fawn take its first steps may begin to rethink their connection with nature. Advances in technology offer new opportunities for deer conservation. Satellite data, drone imagery, and genetic analyses allow deer populations to be monitored much more closely. This information is guiding not only for scientists, but also for policymakers and local communities. Decisions based on accurate data can balance human needs with wildlife conservation. The documentary camera builds a bridge between these scientific studies and natural life. Sometimes it records the silent waiting of a researcher, and sometimes a herd of deer moving across a snowy plain. These images do not only provide information to the viewer, they also offer an opportunity to build empathy. Observing deer from a distance means becoming a guest in their world, even if only briefly. At the end of this long journey, deer still continue to exist as the quiet inhabitants of forests and open lands. They need neither human applause nor approval. Existence is their only purpose. However, this existence is now more fragile than ever. The story of deer is, in fact, the story of humanity itself. It reflects our ability to live in harmony with nature, our limits, and our responsibilities. If we can learn to listen to the steps of these silent creatures, perhaps we can find a chance to redefine our relationship with nature. Because every deer step echoing in the forest sounds like the voice of a world that does not belong to us, but has been entrusted to us. As time continues to continuously flow through the forests, deer go on with their lives without being aware of this flow. For them, there are no calendars and no future plans. There is only the moment, the direction of the wind, the scent of the soil, and the surrounding silence. For a deer, life consists of reading these signs correctly. A single misread moment can determine the difference between survival and extinction. The documentary camera often records this silence. For long periods, it may seem as if nothing is happening. However, this calmness is actually nature at its most intense. Even while standing still, a deer constantly scans its surroundings. Its ears turn in different directions, its nose tests the air, its eyes try to catch even the smallest movement. This state of alertness is a survival reflex filtered through millions of years of evolution. The world deer live in does not resemble the speed of humans. Everything here is slower, but at the same time much sharper. Hunger, cold, predators, and disease are always present. Despite this,